Hey everybody, Nate here from WASD 20. Thanks for joining me. Today we are going to be talking about the role of Dungeons & Dragons in the new Netflix show Stranger Things. The show's been out for a few weeks now, and a lot of people are really liking it, a lot of nerds are really liking it, and I love it. Personally, I thought it was great. It's only 8 episodes, and if you have any way to watch it, I would highly recommend it. Now in the show, Dungeons & Dragons plays a pretty prominent role in a lot of ways, and it kind of got me questioning, do I really enjoy the show? Is this really a good show? Or do I just like it because there's a TV show that's talking about something I love, and they're doing a pretty good job talking about it? And in the end, I come away from it saying, yeah, I probably love this show because it includes a whole lot of 80s culture, a whole lot of nerd culture, and all that stuff. But aside from that, I think that it's hard to argue that it's not a good show. It's just got great storytelling, it's well acted, well directed, the soundtrack is excellent. So I do recommend anyone go watch the show. My wife, who's not into Dungeons & Dragons at all, in fact struggles to understand what I do and why I would want to do it, she really liked the show. And so anyway, that was exciting for me to see that there are a lot of people out there liking this show, who are maybe getting a more positive view of Dungeons & Dragons. I don't know, maybe not. But I want to talk about the use of Dungeons & Dragons in 2 ways in this video. First off, how was it used in the show? What role did the game play in the show? Secondly, why does it matter? So the first question was really thrown in my face when I saw an article on Polygon entitled "The Real Star of Stranger Things is Dungeons & Dragons." And it's by Ben Kuchera, who's a writer I really enjoy. And I gotta say, I really enjoyed the article, but the title, I think, is a little misleading, maybe a little clickbaity. Got me to click on it. All you gotta do is put Dungeons & Dragons in the title of a Polygon article, and I'm probably gonna click on it. But anyway, is it really the real star of the show? No, I don't think so. And I don't think the article goes on to say that at all. I would say I disagree that it is the real star of the show, and I think that the rest of the article doesn't make that claim at all. But that aside, I really enjoyed the article, and my immediate negative reaction to the title, when I put that aside and actually looked at the article, I thought it did a really good job of kind of examining the role and just examining why Dungeons & Dragons is significant to the storyline of Stranger Things. The show is just chock full of all kinds of 80s stuff. They've recreated the 80s really well. The banana bike seats, the styles of clothing, the cars, the look of a store. All of it, I think, really recreates the 80s. As someone who lived in the 80s, it definitely hits that nostalgia, and just they nail it perfectly in so many ways. So is Dungeons & Dragons just part of the trappings of the 80s in the show? Is that what it's about? Or is there something deeper there? The article mentions, is it just a nod to Dungeons & Dragons? No, I agree with the article by Ben Kuchera in saying that it is much more than just a nod to Dungeons & Dragons. It really does play a pretty important role in the show. By the way, there's a link to this article and a couple others that I read that I thought were pretty good on the same topic in the description below, so check those out. So in Stranger Things, there is more than just a nod to Dungeons & Dragons. It is not just part of the background of the show, but it is something that is brought into the forefront in some pretty powerful ways, because the opening scene, the characters are fighting Demogorgon. Who is Demogorgon? Demogorgon is the prince of demons in Dungeons & Dragons, a terrible beast, very powerful, been around since the early days in the mid-70s with Dungeons & Dragons, and even plays a role in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, featured on the cover here of the Out of the Abyss module. And several other pictures in the back of this thing. Demogorgon is also in the Monster Manual under the Demons section, and gets a mention in the Dungeon Master's Guide on page 62, where they're talking about the Abyss. And these kids are fighting this monster, right? And Will throws a fireball spell at the monster instead of casting a protection spell, puts his life at risk. In the end, he confesses to his DM, as the game got interrupted, "The Demogorgon got me. I missed my fireball." So his character would have died. And then moments later, on his way home, he is attacked by a monster that is eerily similar to the Demogorgon. Now, is this thing the Demogorgon? Are these kids living in the D&D module? No. It's clearly different, right? There are some similarities, but there are clearly big differences. So what is the role that D&D plays? Well, I think in that sense it was providing some foreshadowing, and I think that the characters come back to the game as a way to make sense of the really awful things that are happening around them. There are comparisons there that they can make and say, well, it's kind of like this thing. They're not saying, this has come to life, right? They're not saying that. They're mature and smart enough to know that, but they're saying it's kind of like this. It's kind of like our game in some ways. And 11 helps kind of explain it to them using the game pieces and talking about the Veil of Shadows. Now, the Veil of Shadows is something that these guys seem to indicate is a part of D&D, and it's actually not. There's nothing called the Veil of Shadows in D&D. And if you look carefully when they're flipping through the D&D book, you can see this clipping about the Veil of Shadows that it's clearly not from a D&D book. It looks different. It looks like an article clipped from somewhere else. But anyway, as we often do in Dungeons & Dragons and role-playing games, we take inspiration from all over the place, and it looks like that's probably what they've done in this case. There are some things that are similar to the Veil of Shadows. There is the Shadowfell in Dungeons & Dragons now, which is pretty similar to the Veil of Shadows, so maybe they just renamed it. It used to be called the Plane of Shadows before 4th edition. So anyway, don't want to get too off track in the details there, but all that to say that no, what they are seeing is not a Dungeons & Dragons module coming to life or anything like that, but they are using the game to help them make sense of something that is happening around them. And I think that is the power of role-playing games in some ways. We can make comparisons and think about things we've overcome in a game. We can think about interactions we've had in a game, and those things really can benefit us in the real world. So to summarize, the role of Dungeons & Dragons and Stranger Things is to help the characters make sense of some of the things that are going on, to even kind of provide clues for them as they dig deeper and try to find comparisons between the game and their reality. I also think it's worth mentioning that the game treats Dungeons & Dragons in a very positive light. The game is something these pretty nerdy boys enjoy. It can make them feel powerful. They can exercise their creativity and their imaginations, and it clearly just brings them a lot of joy and a sense of camaraderie as well as they come around to try to defeat monsters and challenges. And so I think that they do a good job of showing that aspect of the game. And so I think the treatment of Dungeons & Dragons in Stranger Things is very positive and unlocks some of the essence of the game for audiences that might not be very familiar with it at all. So I think that's really cool, and I'm hopeful, and this is kind of now getting into the why does it matter part, I'm hopeful that the show will encourage people to check this game out. For people like me, when I think of myself 2-3 years ago, I had never played Dungeons & Dragons. It was something that was always kind of on the edge. Like it was something that I had heard about, something that I knew a little about. I had read some of the D&D novels. I had played some of the video games, but it was nothing I had ever experienced. And it was in reading about it in a couple of books that I was inspired to say, I gotta check this thing out. This looks pretty cool. It looks like there's something here that I would really enjoy. And I hope that's what Stranger Things can be for a lot of people. I hope that they can see the game, they can see the joy, the creativity, the imagination, and they can say, there's something here. I hope to check this out. And of course, I hope all those people watch all my videos and subscribe to my channel so that they can learn how to play the game. So to summarize it all, I think that Dungeons & Dragons does play a key role. I don't think it's the star of the show, but I don't think it is just a nod. I don't think it's like, let's take E.T. for example, where in one of the opening scenes the characters are playing a game that it's not Dungeons & Dragons, but it's basically Dungeons & Dragons. I think they call it something else. And they're sitting around, and it's kind of part of the background and the culture of the 1980s. It's much deeper than that, and I think it's really cool. So, Now that I've spoiled Stranger Things for anyone who has not seen it, I highly recommend you go watch it anyway. And let me know what you think in the comments below. How did you feel about the treatment of Dungeons & Dragons and Stranger Things? What did you think about the show in general? I'd love to hear from you. If you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed for more great content. And if you are new to D&D and Stranger Things has brought you in, make sure you check out my beginner's guide to D&D on my website. I have how to play D&D, character creation videos, and a bunch of other very beginner-friendly videos that you should check out. Look down in the links in the description below. Alright, that's all for this one. Everybody take care, happy gaming, and you'll see me again very soon.